Imagine paying millions of dollars for a painting. It's authenticated by top experts, praised by critics, and displayed proudly in museums. You believe you own a rare masterpiece, a treasure lost to history. But years later, a tiny lab test reveals a devastating truth. The pigment in the paint didn't even exist when the artist was alive. The masterpiece you thought you owned is nothing but a forgery. And the man behind it? Not a shadowy thief working in secrecy, but a charming, soft-spoken painter who lived openly, laughing at the world he deceived. He didn't just copy art, he created new works for masters who were long dead, and he fooled the art world for nearly 4 decades. This is the story of Wolfgang Beltracchi, a man some call the greatest art forger in history, and others call a true artist who exposed the arrogance of the industry. His brush didn't just paint pictures, it painted lies so convincing they became the truth. It all started with a seed of doubt. In 1995, a German collector looked at one of his prized possessions, a painting called Aragon and Mara. It was supposed to be a work by Johannes Moltzan, a respected expressionist. For 10 years, the painting hung proudly on his wall, but something about it gnawed at him. The brushwork, the composition, maybe even a sixth sense whispered that it wasn't right. To be sure, he sent the painting for scientific testing. When the results came back, they shattered him. The canvas was a forgery. The masterpiece he thought he owned was nothing but a clever fake. Anger and humiliation drove him to investigate. He tracked down other Moltzan paintings sold around the same time. One was owned by Moltzan's widow, another by a gallery in Berlin. Both turned out to be counterfeit. And then came the ultimate proof, a so-called 1920 Moltzan containing a pigment that wasn't invented until 1957, a 37-year impossibility. Armed with evidence, the collector went to the police. Investigators traced the fakes back to a Berlin art dealer. When pressed, the dealer pointed to his supplier, but the trail ended there. Even worse, the statute of limitations had expired. Legally, the forger could not be prosecuted. For the police, the case was closed. But in reality, it was far from over. The forgeries they had uncovered were only the tiniest fragment of something much larger, a criminal empire hiding in plain sight. At the very moment the case was abandoned, a man named Wolfgang Beltracchi was in his studio, putting the final strokes on another masterpiece. He wasn't copying existing works. Instead, he invented paintings in the styles of artists like Heinrich Campendonck, pieces that plausibly could have been lost to history. When he finished, he didn't sign Beltracchi. He signed Campendonck. His genius was not only in the brushstrokes, but in his foresight. He bought old canvases at flea markets, scraped them clean, and repainted on top. He mixed pigments to mimic early 20th century formulas, even artificially aging them to look authentic. To scientists and experts, his work seemed historically accurate. But Wolfgang didn't work alone. His wife, Helene, became the storyteller, and the story she wove was irresistible. She claimed the paintings had belonged to her grandfather, who received them from Alfred Flechtheim, a real Jewish art dealer persecuted by the Nazis. According to Helene, before the Nazis confiscated Flechtheim's collection, he entrusted many works to her family for safekeeping. Hidden away for decades, they were now resurfacing. It was the perfect tale, historically grounded, emotionally compelling, and difficult to disprove. When Helene walked into Christie's with a painting called Girl with Swan, the auction house was enchanted. It sold for nearly $100,000. That sale was the opening move in what would become one of the most successful art frauds in modern history. The Beltracchi's forged works, dubbed the Jaeger's collection, became sensations. Collectors were eager to buy, museums eager to exhibit, and experts eager to authenticate. Some of Wolfgang's paintings entered catalogs, cementing them as real in the scholarly record. One piece was sold to actor Steve Martin for $860,000. Another, a forged Max Ernst, went for 7 million. For a while, the scheme was unstoppable. Wolfgang knew exactly how to play the game. He avoided icons like Picasso or Van Gogh, whose works face relentless scrutiny. Instead, he focused on prolific but less heavily policed artists. He created works that were believable, not copies, but new discoveries that filled in the missing chapters of art history. The Beltracchis thrived. They lived luxuriously, traveling through Europe, collecting wealth, and laughing quietly at the art world they fooled. But deception carries weight, and cracks began to show. In 2006, Wolfgang completed a piece called Red Picture with Horses, once again attributed to Campendonk. The painting sold for more than $3 million. But this time, the buyer wanted documentation, a certificate of authenticity. None existed. The painting was subjected to forensic testing, and science once again pulled back the curtain. Inside the layers of paint was titanium white, a pigment unavailable at the time Campendonk supposedly painted it. The fraud unraveled. Investigators retraced the Beltracchi's steps. They examined other works from the Jaeger's collection. They discovered staged photographs Wolfgang had concocted. Helene, dressed as her grandmother, posed in front of the forgeries, shot with an old camera to look decades older. The deception was both clever and brazen. In 2010, German police moved in. Wolfgang, Helene, her sister, and their friend Otto were arrested. The art world trembled. How many paintings in galleries, in private collections, in museums were actually Beltracchi's? Estimates ranged in the hundreds, but in court, prosecutors could only prove 14. Wolfgang confessed. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Helene received 4. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. The Beltracchis didn't serve their sentences in dark, high-security prisons. They were placed in open facilities. Wolfgang could paint during the day and return to confinement at night. In a bizarre twist of irony, the man who once forged paintings was now free to sell his own under his real name, and collectors lined up to buy them. By the time Wolfgang walked free, he wasn't just a criminal. He was a legend. Some called him a genius who exposed the arrogance of the art market, proving that experts and collectors valued signatures and backstories more than true artistic talent. Others condemned him as nothing more than a conman who profited from lies. Yet, one thing was undeniable. The Beltracchi affair changed the art world forever, and it left haunting questions. What makes art valuable? Is it the brushstrokes, the skill, the beauty of the image? Or is it the name in the corner, the story attached, the prestige of ownership? Would collectors ever have paid millions for Wolfgang's paintings if they knew his true identity from the start? Or did his deception simply exploit a truth the art world refused to admit? That value is often a matter of perception, not reality. Wolfgang Beltracchi still paints today. He signs his own name. Ironically, his notoriety has made him successful, this time legitimately. His works sell not just because of their beauty, but because of the legend attached to him. And perhaps that is the greatest irony of all. A man who rose to fame by deceiving others now enjoys a career precisely because of the deception he once committed. So who was Wolfgang Beltracchi? A criminal mastermind who tricked the world for selfish gain? Or an artist who pulled back the curtain and revealed the art world's greatest secret? That value is often just a story we tell ourselves. What cannot be denied is that he had the rare ability to create beauty indistinguishable from the masters, but instead of chasing recognition under his own name, he built a life on lies, forever changing how we view art, authenticity, and trust. And maybe, in the end, his story isn't just about forgery. Maybe it's about us, the collectors, the critics, the audience, who wanted to believe so badly that we ignored the truth staring us in the face. That is the legacy of Wolfgang Beltracchi. And it's a story the art world will never forget.